Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun, where we will help you understand and talk about your finances. And joining me today, I'm really excited to have Mike Begg, co-founder and CEO at AMZ Advisors. And I saw, I was looking you up a little bit, doing a little bit of research on you. I see you got a really interesting creative agency. That's my background. Before Dryrun, I had an agency for over a decade. So I always love talking with people in your sort of industry. Thanks for joining me, Mike.
Hey, Blaine, thanks for having me. And I'm excited to be sharing my story with you today.
So you know what, we always love to go right back to the beginning, and it's the inception stories of entrepreneurs, how they got started, and I'm always so interested in that. What was your first just inkling you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's tough to say, honestly. I don't know. It's not like I grew up like wanting to be an entrepreneur. That was never really the goal. I think it was more of just a personality thing than anything. Like, for example, I really struggle with authority. I have gotten in plenty of trouble in the past with that when I was younger. So I think that was one of the things that really drove me that way. But I think there's really two experiences that made me more interested in it, and one that actually made me make the leap. The first was in college. It was the first time I really had exposure to other entrepreneurs, or a lot of other entrepreneurs. During the summers, I'm from Connecticut originally. I would work in Block Island in Rhode Island, which is a small little island. And I was working at a marina there, docking boats. And obviously the people that have the boats are the ones that have money. You know, they have their own businesses. They've been successful in whatever they've done. A lot of them were in construction. A lot of them were in other industries, like some were brewers, some had their own breweries, restaurants, whatever it may be. And that was kind of the first exposure to being around business people like that all the time and seeing how they enjoy life and how they live life and the things they have. And I was like, oh, this is pretty nice. This is kind of something I think I want for myself. So that was probably like the first real exposure to it and really making me think a lot more about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was the same way in some ways, where I didn't have these aspirations to be an entrepreneur, but I was just like a magnet. It just sucked me in without even thinking about it. And I do have that trouble with authority. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. It's like, I don't like to really be told what to do at all. I can't even do I have trouble doing like a yoga class. I'm like, I don't want to tell me what to do. But it's just something consistent there, I think, amongst entrepreneurs. But it's interesting because you're talking about seeing these entrepreneurs, and they got the boats, and the really nice boats, and it's one thing that I know from the outside, everything always looks so shiny and clean and happy, but behind closed doors, so it's always a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody. So what was your first, I guess, endeavor when you took your first step into entrepreneurship?
Well, it was actually funny because someone made me think about this that I hadn't even thought about it before. But while we were there working on in the marina, I guess this was really the first endeavor. Not that I considered it like an entrepreneurial endeavor, but we were essentially arbitraging the price of bags of ice. So we had the marina, obviously, where everyone with their boats was staying, but there's also the mooring field, which is where all the sailboats and everybody that doesn't want to stay at the marina keeps their boat. And everyone on the mooring field had to come get ice. And we realized, like, well, what if we bring the ice to them? Like, how would that work? And so we started buying the ice ourselves, bringing it out to them, selling it to them at like a 3 times markup. Plus they would tip us for bringing it out to them. So like that, from a standpoint of being an entrepreneur, was like the first one. And I had never really even realized that until another podcast brought that up recently. And it just makes me think about it. I was like, oh man, like there's so many probably little things that I did in the past that were, I guess, signals or, signals of intent, I guess I would say, that I was doing and not even realizing it.
Yeah. Seeing opportunity, jumping on opportunity, and not really, you may not be conscious, but you grab opportunity and run. Right. And it's amazing that the stories I hear from entrepreneurs and the way they found they found a market somewhere and they did something, and it's really interesting that to hear all these things. So you again, like, so you kind of had that experience there. It obviously in the back of your mind was starting to tickle your brain a bit. Where did you go from there? Did you were you going to school, or what was sort of those next steps and that started to formulate that plan?
So this is one of the reasons why I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur, becoming an entrepreneur immediately. And I played sports pretty much my entire life, but I played sports in college as well. And I played team sports. I played lacrosse. So it's very much focused on how the team operates together. And that to me didn't really fit with the idea of entrepreneurship. And it's kind of just the mentality I had is like, we're always working as a team, working towards a goal. And because of that, I kind of went into corporate after I graduated from school. And I worked at Deloitte for a few years. And I absolutely hated working at Deloitte. It was probably my least favorite job I've ever had. And it taught me that if I don't like something, I need to, change my situation or take active steps to change the situation into something I do like. So from there, I started studying real estate at NYU. I got a couple of certifications at NYU in real estate. Ended up getting a job working for Sears in their real estate development group, or in their real estate group initially. And when I first joined Sears, again, kind of same team mentality and everything, we were focused on a big project to create a real estate investment trust. So we spun up a $2.5 billion real estate investment trust, sold that off. After that, some of my colleagues left and went with the real estate investment trust. I stayed with Sears, moved into real estate development, which I absolutely loved. I was working on like projects. I had a lot more control of how the projects looked. Like I was responsible for the ideas, for the negotiations with the tenants, with the retailers, whoever they may be. And that was cool. I really enjoyed that. It gave me a lot more responsibility. But at the same time, I still kind of had that feeling in the back of my mind, like I'm doing this for someone else. Like I'm not doing this for myself. And it was just there. That was that mentality of like, this feels wrong. I enjoy it, but like, I can't imagine myself doing this forever. And during that time is when I really started realizing that I need to do something on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you start to identify what that was? Like where you found that opportunity and thought, okay, this is my opportunity to take a bit of a leap.
So this is going to sound a little bit strange, but the first time that when I say we, myself and a few friends were talking about like kind of starting our own business or starting our own project, was coming about obviously after we spun off the REIT. Sears continued to struggle, or the company was struggling overall. And it kind of made me realize that there's no such thing as a secure job. That was the first breakthrough I had. And I was like, like my job depends on someone else making the right decisions. Why don't I make decisions for myself or have more control over it? So we started playing with different ideas. The first idea was kind of like a content YouTube channel. And we started thinking about it and we were like, this is going to take a lot of investment. It's going to take a lot of time. Like we're never going to be able to really move on out of our jobs or day-to-day stuff in the short term. So we kept kind of looking, kept trying to find stuff. And then as part of my job at Sears, I was responsible for selling off assets as well, selling off real estate assets. And a couple deals came through where we were looking at owned real estate at closed malls, at like malls that were pretty much vacant at this point. And some of the people buying them were FedEx, which is interesting in itself, but Amazon was buying it. And I was like, that's weird. Why is Amazon buying a mall? And it turned out they were trying to turn it into a distribution center.
Interesting.
Which makes sense because now they have this massive distribution network in the US, but that was what they were doing. They were buying the land to turn it into a distribution center. And I was like, that's okay. That's interesting. Like, why are they doing that? Then I started looking into Amazon more and realized it was possible to sell products, sell books on Amazon, a variety of different things. And that's where we were like, all right, well, this is something that is more attainable. It's something that we can achieve in the short term. And then from there, we started just down that path. We developed ebooks. I think I have like 15, 20 ebooks that still sell to this day. I get royalties on all of them, which is nice. That was the first step. And then we were like, Well, we could sell physical goods too. So we started doing retail arbitrage, going to Walmart, Target, like pretty much, we went to pretty much everyone in the tri-state area,
Yeah.
bought everything they had on clearance and then turned it, put it on Amazon, sold it there, started making money. We made our first like $10,000-$15,000 there. And then we were like, well, let's just buy stuff from China with our own brand on it. And that's where we got the idea to start a private label. And that was like really where it felt like we had our first like real business. It's like, this is our brand. This is what we're building. These are our products. And like, okay, this feels a lot more like making progress in that direction. And, that's kind of the first, significant business I would say I had.
Yeah. So how, walk me through a little bit of that, that process of when you got to the point and said, okay, let's take this step. Let's get our own products. How did you go about like finding those products, building a brand and marketing it so that it was something that would actually start to generate that drive, right?
So we started with just obviously educating ourselves and learning more. There were a ton of free resources at the time, Facebook groups, podcasts, YouTube, like all those types of stuff that we were reading, learning, and listening to. And that gave us a lot of the skills or the knowledge of like, this is how we do it. So from there, we learned that we needed to buy a software that would essentially allow us to scrape Amazon, the front end of Amazon, and identify what the projected sales look like. And then from there, we just started researching categories, identifying what categories might be less competitive versus more competitive, or which ones have more upside. And that led us to choose a couple categories in the art supply category. We were selling markers, we were selling paint. Those were the types of products we started with. And it was just a matter of using Alibaba at that point to start finding manufacturers, ordering samples. Eventually, we found someone we trusted, placed our first order, which I think was like 500 units, and just kind of moved from there. And the great thing was once we actually had the inventory, we launched in like Q4 2014, I think. And that was the first time that we had any products live on Amazon, apart from the retail arbitrage, but like our own brand. And first day we sold like 25 units, and we were like, whoa, like this was unexpected. Okay, like maybe we're on to something. And that was like, okay, yeah, we can figure this out now. And from there, we just started adding other products that were within the same brand, same product line. Everything we did was just focus on Amazon, focus on where people are or where their attention is, where they're looking for products, and just sell and build the brand through that.
So it seems like, not to sort of skip forward, but it seems like that whole Amazon environment has likely changed a lot in the last 10 years. Like tell me a little bit about that. Cause it feels like it's pretty different now.
It is. I mean, it's constantly evolving, but back then it was nice. I mean, there were a lot of categories that were pretty much wide open or where the major brands weren't paying attention. So for example, I mentioned we were selling art products. What's the biggest art supply company out there? Crayola. And we were competing against Crayola in some of those categories and doing better than Crayola, which was kind of like, oh, well, these companies don't know what they're doing. And that's not the case anymore. Like everyone's kind of caught on to it, but that's where the idea of an agency came from, was realizing that these companies didn't know what they were doing. But back then, like I said, you could come into a category that a major brand was established in, start selling, start making money. And the ease of doing it was significantly easier than now. Now, especially after COVID, when every brand realized that online shopping is so much more important for them to pay attention to, the big advertising dollars started rolling in, and the massive budgets that multinational companies have started buying up more and more of the advertising inventory, which has obviously driven up costs. CPCs are significantly higher. ROAS is significantly lower. So that is probably the biggest change, is that like the game has shifted so much more to pay to play, that if you're not advertising on the platform or you're not putting your brand out there enough and spending enough, you're probably not going to be able to come in and be successful. So whereas I didn't need a big ad budget years ago, now I would need a really big ad budget to just get the brand launched.
Okay. And I noticed like, and if, I don't know how long ago this started, but I've noticed it more recently in the last few years when they have like branded stores, like a big brand would have its own store on Amazon and be competing with people selling probably their products on, but I know sort of as a consumer, when I'm looking at something like that and I want to find the brand, because then I know I'm like, well, I trust them because that's legit. Like that's Crayola and I can get my markers right from them. Right. Is there as much room, or like, I guess you've sort of answered it in a way, but is there room for independent sellers now, or is it, or do they have to have something really unique compared to the big brands? How do they do that?
I think there's always room. Again, it just really comes down to the amount of money you have to invest in the marketing and positioning of your product. But I think the key thing to consider here is that if you're building a brand, it needs to look professional. You need to have a presence, not just on Amazon, but you should have your own website. You should be on other platforms, other places. You should have a social media presence, make it look like it's professional. I think that's one of the best ways to get people to actually believe that it's a real brand. One of the things that I notice like all the time, especially in like certain categories like apparel, electronics on Amazon, you'll have these Chinese brands that are just, random letters thrown together, it seems like. And that type of stuff, I mean, my opinion as a consumer, I don't trust that. Like if it's just, JCXNYH selling their, shirts on Amazon, I'm gonna be like, it might be cheap, but it sounds a little sketchy. So like, I don't know that I'm going to trust that.
Yeah. And so like, do these companies, especially we're seeing so much direct to consumer in apparel and in, Dollar Shave Club, all these different sort of things. Are you seeing kind of like they're going both ways? It's like, okay, we're building to put our brand or to build to sell on Amazon, and we're going to support that with a direct to consumer brand? Or is it like, hey, we've started this direct to consumer brand and we see Amazon as a channel that we can really leverage, right?
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting. I think there's two different lines of thought on this. I would say that people that are experienced in D2C, not on Amazon, D2C websites, they hate Amazon. They don't want to be on Amazon.
Okay.
And they very much stick to the D2C channels. And some of them do very well. Like, for example, we work with a pretty big brand for affiliate marketing right now. They grew to about, I think it was 24 million a year in revenue through D2C without ever being on Amazon until this year. And it's like, wow, like that's impressive. So there's obviously still a lot of great opportunity for that. And the practitioners that are very experienced in building the D2C side want to continue to focus on D2C. From my perspective, like I am obviously more of an Amazon e-commerce person. That's where my background came from. I see more of the value of how Amazon fits within all of my sales channels, because it's really about like product discovery. And I think you can have success either way. In my personal opinion, I would prefer to have my product discovered through these other channels and then try to figure out how to capture them through my own website or push them to my email list or whatever it may be. But you can go either way, and like you don't need to have both. You can just have the D2C. It really depends on your experience, your preference, and the skill set that you and your team have.
And it feels like that D2C market is it's already sort of getting crowded. It almost feels like the D2C market, especially in apparel and some of these, feels like the craft brewery. It's like the first one opened, and then there's like thousands of them, and it feels kind of the same way, that it's like the first guy to make a merino t-shirt, and then there's like 50 of them, right? Is there, how do you stand out? Like if someone wanted to dive in today, can they do it, or is it just like the dollars are a lot higher now?
It's tough. I mean, it's doable. I'm not going to say it's not doable. I really think, like, especially now, it comes about the way that you connect with your audience. And I think content marketing is the biggest one. So I think the people that are very successful are the ones that create really good content. And like good examples of this are like True Classic. True Classic creates really good content for t-shirts and apparel that I find all the time online. And it's something that actually differentiates them from, the random Chinese brand that threw up their products on Amazon. So I think when you lead with the right marketing initiatives and you have the right channels that are pushing people to your storefront or to Amazon or wherever it is, I think that's where you'll really see success. So it's just another consideration. Like I said before, 7-8 years ago, you might have been able to launch on Amazon and spend a little money on ads and start selling your product. Well, now it's like, how does the whole ecosystem look like? What channels are consumers paying attention to, and how do I create the content or the means of actually attracting them to my brand? And right now, I think video content, and we see that with TikTok, we see that with Instagram, like those types of platforms, that type of content is just doing so well right now. So if you're going to launch a brand or build a brand, I think you have to really consider that within your marketing strategy.
So I want to circle back a little bit now, because we've talked about like this opportunity and what you guys are, doing to some degree here. We haven't dove in too deep there, but I want to go all the way back to, there was a point where you basically had your own store on Amazon. You were selling this product. And then at what point did you take on that first client of, we can show them how to do this?
Yeah, I think it was about, we were about a year into selling products online, and we were steadily growing. But the tough thing about selling products is, and especially if you don't have a ton of experience, and we were still kind of new at this point, is the cash flow. Cash flow is extremely tough because you got to reinvest in inventory, you got to reinvest in advertising. And on top of that, you have all your other fixed costs that come with it. And we were looking for a way to support the cash flow that we were getting right now. And we realized, well, why don't we just take our marketing and sales skills and use that to help brands? We're better at that than we are at inventory management. So let's take the skills we have and then go out and help some brands. So what we did was we started in a few different ways. First, we were finding job posts on like Indeed for companies looking for e-commerce people. And we were just reaching out to the companies and just saying like, hey, we can, this is what our agency does. Are you interested in? I think we got our first client from that, but it wasn't a great client. Like, they weren't really committed. We weren't really making a lot of money from it either. So we started continuing to test things. We got onto Upwork, built a company page on Upwork, set up our profiles and everything. And that's where we really got our first client. And it was a big client, actually. We were working with a very big dental supply company called Rembrandt, their name is Rainier, but they own the brands Rembrandt Whitening. They own Plackers. They do billions of dollars a year in sales. And there was another consultant that was helping them on e-commerce that didn't know how to do the Amazon piece, and they were looking for someone on Amazon, on Upwork, that had the Amazon experience. We applied for it. My partner sold them on it. And then from there, that was like the first client where we were like, okay, like now we have cash flow. Now we have something that works. And it just continued to grow from there.
Yeah. As soon as you use the old CF words, that's what Dryrun's all about. Like, we built our business is 90% of it is driving, under cash flow. People understand their cash flow. That's where I came up with the idea, was having an agency for 10 years. And in 2008, it was, cash flow, was becoming a problem. So it's interesting to see, my other podcast, Biz Beer and BS with Mike and Blaine, a little bit more all over the place. Mike, basically, he had a staffing company, and he opened up a bar for the exact same reason, to drive cash flow, to get instant cash that he could move around the business. And it's interesting how it's like solving a problem evolved into, I imagine, is it the big part of your business? Do you still have your own e-commerce, or is it basically shifted to the service model exclusively?
We do still have products we sell in our own brands, but from we bootstrap everything. So like we never had investors. And I think when you come from that mentality of bootstrapping and growing from nothing, cash flow becomes such a bigger focus of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to focus on. We've, at this point, the agency drives, I think, 90% of our revenue. But like, we do still have products we sell, and we've just continued to focus on growing the agency, and we've done a really good job over the past few years, because the cash flow has just been so solid. And we're like, you know what, let's keep making the cash. Let's figure out new ways to invest it into other projects, into other startups, and whatever we can. And it just kind of becomes a flywheel to really get everything else going.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about like, so you got this first customer onto like from Upwork, right? You're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
we're on to something here, right? And but there's a lot of steps from kind of that first customer to where, I guess, in a way, like when did you feel like okay, this is a legit business, like or we feel established, right? Like that's, I remember when I started my first business, and then we got some contracts, and then, but then it was actually a few years down the road where you kind of turn around and go, yeah, this is now a thing with people and costs and offices and like, all this stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
how did that sort of grow from this first step into like, okay, now we got a bunch of mouths to feed?
Yeah, well, it didn't grow to we have a bunch of mouths to feed for a while. We were like, hey, let's do all the work. Let's cash flow as much as possible ourselves. And we got to the point where we were making 16, $17,000. It was myself and three partners. We were each making $17,000 a month running it ourselves. And we were like, this is really nice, but our work-life balance kind of sucks right now. So
Yeah.
that's when we started making the hires, started growing the team that way. And I would say probably uh, maybe after hire like 6 or 7 is where we started really thinking about like, all right, now we have this team, we have a real business established. Like we need to focus on how to grow it from here. And part of the reason was because this team was taking away a lot of the responsibilities that we had. So we had a lot more time to actually focus on the growth. So
Mm-hmm.
the early stages were very nice when we were making, $16,000, $17,000 a month. But once we got to the point of making sure that we were growing, making sure we were paying everyone, the team felt supported, we were giving them the responsibilities they needed, the growth opportunities they needed, is really where that mentality shifted. And it's like, all right, now we have a real company. Now we have to learn a whole different skill set. Like, how do we manage employees? How do we deal with payroll? How do we deal with all these operational challenges that come with having a team? And that's probably where I would say the main shift or focus happened to realizing we had a business.
Yeah, it's a different feel. I remember from yeah, it was kind of like you. It's like, well, you're bringing in money, and it's like, this is good. And then a few years later, it's like, I'm not sure I'm making much more, but boy, do we have to turn a lot of cash through to keep the doors open and pay everybody. And it's like, a little bit of that. Man, I had it pretty good back then when it was just money coming to the door. I'd have to pay all the bills, right? But it's but it opens up opportunity, right, too.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing is like you get to a point where you either want to just have cash flow and a lifestyle business, and that's fine if that's what you want, but or you want to build an asset that you're actually going to get something from at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And we were much more focused on that. We were like, all
Yeah.
right, well, let's build an asset, let's continue to grow it. And yeah, there's been plenty of growing pains, exactly where you're saying like, oh man, that money was nice back then, now I have to worry about so much more. And it forces you to adjust and learn new things and become much better at decision making. And that's just kind of the natural evolution of things, I think.
Yeah.
You either stay as a consultant forever or you actually, put a flag down and start building something around it. And I'm much bigger proponent of the second of the latter rather than the former.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the direction that we took with AMZ Advisors, some of the other projects that I have going on.
Well, and I know with us that what really pulled us along to a large degree was the opportunity. It was the opportunities to get larger and more interesting projects, and we knew kind of what we were good at, and it was very much sort of in a high tech realm, and those weren't little projects, right? So it's like the really interesting stuff is over here, and so we kept building the resources up so we could actually deliver, because we couldn't do, like, I couldn't as a consultant have done, or as me, myself and I, or one staff or whatever, done what we were doing later, but it was where our passion was and where we could offer the most value. And so I want to sort of talk a little bit about, so you started to expand, you kind of like, okay, here's some friends, we got together, we started to, get into business. Well, now suddenly, as things start to build, like you talked about, well, now you have staff, you have sales, you have like operations, you have, how did you start to go, okay, here's how we're going to make this work. Here's how we're going to, who's good at what? How do we divvy this up so that we can grow and we can scale?
Yeah, so the first iteration of that was when it was just myself and the three partners, and we started growing. So it's like, who's going to handle what areas? And one partner was responsible for sales. One partner was responsible for essentially content creation, like SEO, graphic design, working with that team. And then I was responsible for like the marketing strategy, the advertising, spend, and all of those types of things. And then those general areas of responsibility continue to stay the same as we started hiring. So we figured out like from there, it's like, okay, like I'm going to run advertising, like my responsibilities probably in that first phase of having employees was marketing for the company, advertising for our clients, marketing strategy for our clients, finance because of my real estate development background. So it was kind of a weird mix between those two things. And my other partner continued to handle sales. My other partner was kind of handling operations and the content piece. And it just, starts evolving from there. And I would say that we definitely made like mistakes when we were hiring or how we tried to hire. We focused a lot initially on what are the responsibilities of mine that are taking the most time, or what can I outsource to someone else? And it naturally led us to a position where we were just hiring, expecting someone to solve the problem. It's like, all right, like I'm dealing a lot with this. Like I need someone to handle this. I'm going to hire someone. And instead of building a process around it, now we just had other people in the business that we were managing that were kind of doing their own things to get things done. And I think that was probably one of the harder learning points that we've had in the business is, well, that's not the best way to do it. It would be better if you're going to hire someone for an area that you don't have the experience in. It would be better to hire someone that has more experience in the area and builds out processes for other team members to come in and run the pieces that are more time consuming or higher value, whatever it may be. And I think when we started making that shift, which was really over the past 3-4 years, is where we started getting much better results and much faster growth instead of like having a bunch of people running around doing their own things, their own processes, and the results were mixed for everybody.
Yeah. And I know we've almost every business owner talks about hiring for culture, and I know we've made mistakes in the past where we checked boxes first and culture sort of second, and that didn't always work. And so we've kind of learned some hard lessons that way. How do you guys, like, I imagine that's something you guys are talking about. Like, how do you know, besides the checklist, that you're getting someone joining the team that is going to be really a true part of the team?
Well, I think it's interesting when we look at our own experience, and we've never really had culture problems, which is actually great. It's been a really good fit for everyone pretty much. And I think part of the reason because of that is who the founding partners are. Like I said to myself before, I played lacrosse in college. I have another partner that played lacrosse in college, one that played hockey in college. So we all kind of came from the team mentality. We know what works within a team and what doesn't work within a team. And we just kind of clearly established the things that were most important to us. For example, objectivity is one thing that's incredibly important. We want to have things be objective. We want to be open with people and transparent on what the goals are. And there's no leeway. There's no gray area. There's no interpretation for it. It's either you did it or you didn't. And like, I think a lot of people respect that. It's like you set the goals, you try to hit the goals, you don't hit the goals, you try to figure out how to improve. And those are the types of things that we really focus on culturally. It's like, how do we be more transparent? How do we solve problems better? How do we communicate better? And I think we put those things forward as what was the most important. And the hires that we were bringing in, we were looking for people that had those same qualities or respected those same qualities. I think we maybe had like 2 bad hires early on that were not that. But ever since then, we haven't had any. And like one of the biggest testaments to it is the number of employees that stay with us. Like our churn is incredibly low. The only employees that really leave are employees that we fire.
Mhm.
And like that's phenomenal for us because we have incredibly loyal people. They really enjoy working for us, and all of that translates to better results for our clients.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the things that has been like massive for us growing the company, and the way that we established the culture we wanted from the start, and then we continue to reiterate it. So we have quarterly company-wide calls, we have monthly team calls, we have weekly department calls, we have daily stand-ups with each individual team. So
Mhm.
we're constantly communicating, which is one of the big things. We're constantly escalating problems until so we can solve those problems, and we're measuring everything based on the goals and the KPIs we set. So
Mhm.
objectivity is there, transparency is there, the expectations are clear for everybody, and we're clearly trying to solve problems and improve the business. And it just flows through everything we communicate, everything we do on a day-to-day basis, and it all kind of came from what we just decided we valued from our own experiences of being in a team.
So are you, is it a remote team or do you have an office or a mix or how does that work?
It's we use so we used to have an office. We when was it? I think it was February like 15th, 2020. I signed a lease on a 12-person office,
Oh no.
and then COVID hit like three days later, and
Yeah.
yeah, that office sat vacant. Ever since then, everyone's been pretty much been remote.
Mhm.
Uh, I myself work in an office every day just because I can't work from home, and I have a partner that works here in the office with me. But the entire team is remote from there, which going back to like the culture, that makes it that much more difficult when you don't
Mhm.
have people in office and there physically to be able to demonstrate what is important or what you value the most. So it's
Mhm.
really where I think like the reiteration, making sure it's clear, the expectations are clear, having all the meetings, all the conversations we're having, and showing them what we're valuing, and just kind of literally repeating it until it becomes like stuck in their brain is really the key to building a culture when you're working remote.
Yeah, there's so much. Like I know now we have. I'm sure more communication now when it's online than when I had an office. You know,
Yeah.
like this is going back quite a while, but you know when we had instant messaging, you know, it was like the very early versions pre Slack, you know, and but
Yeah.
40 feet away or whatever. And it was, but there was some things I really miss about the office environment of it's sort of a little bit more of the cooler talk, the you know the ping pong and the foosball. It was probably not the best for efficient, you know, productivity, but there was some of that culture that you just can't quite get online. But with the communication tools, it's just so instant, and I think we have more communication than ever, which is really valuable.
Yeah, and I think Slack is obviously incredibly useful for that. We not only use Slack internally, but we also use it for our client stuff. Async
Mm-hmm.
video is another great way for everyone to stay in communication and to explain things clearly. Email obviously works as well, but it's not as efficient. Like, and then the meetings, and I think communication. It was one of the things that one of my partners said is like what we're trying to do with the way we built out the teams. Like this is going to be really complex, and I was like, yes, communication is going to be very complex, but the more we focus on solving this problem, the better things are going to run overall. And I think from everything we've implemented from a communication standpoint, it shows that the
Mm-hmm.
results work. And you're right. It is easier when you can walk to someone's cubicle, 40 feet away and ask them a question, but that's not the reality of how most digital businesses work anymore. So you have to adapt. You have to find new mediums to communicate on. And that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, I know we were like my last business. We had a big office. We kind of like you. We signed a lease on a ginormous office right before the recession hit in 2009, and then we had this like, how many ping pong tables do you want? Like it just was again just unfortunate timing, right? With this business with Dryrun, we were all remote right from the beginning, and it was more because. I wasn't trying to find people like in my city. I was trying to find the right people no matter where they were. And
Exactly.
so we seemed to be in a way, kind of a weird business. And then once COVID hit, suddenly we were normal. It's kind of gratifying to go, okay, now everyone's, wants to meet with us on Zoom, and no one thinks we're weird anymore. But we've learned a lot of sort of, not, I don't want to say lessons. It's more of, we just learned over the years, kind of as a remote team, sort of what seems to work, and who to hire that can be really effective, and that fits the culture and everything. But also, really importantly, the systems that we put into place to make sure that there is a ton of communication and all of that activity going on all the time. And it's a challenge, but it's, there's so many benefits, and there's challenges with it, like anything else. It's just kind of the trade-offs.
Yeah. I mean, I think the main benefit you kind of named there at the beginning is that you have the ability to tap into talent no matter where they are. And I think that's the biggest advantage is, if you don't have to rely on who is in your local market, it becomes that much easier to find people that are good. And I think that is a unique advantage to companies that are digital and that are remote. I know from my own experience, we've made some really good hires from people that don't live anywhere near where we had an office. So like, it wouldn't have been possible for them to work for us, and we might not have found someone that is as good as them, or that is as qualified for them. So I think it is a really big advantage for companies. It's probably one of the biggest arguments for staying remote and for keeping your team remote.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to ask you a little bit about who is your ideal customer? Like, if you're people who listen to the show, like, who should be talking with you? Who do you love to serve? Who is just like you can help the most, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with a whole range of clients, and I mentioned some of the bigger ones that we started with, and we've kind of come to the realization that enterprise level companies are challenging to work with, mainly because there's just so many stakeholders that all want to have their say. It's actually counterproductive. There's nothing like jumping on a meeting with 12 other people and then have them all argue about what needs to be done, what's not being done. Yeah. I still remember to this day, we jumped on a call like that. And one of the 12 people was like, whoa, who are these people on the call? Like, all right, no, we got to talk about this. Ended the call there. And we were like, really? Like, what is this? So like, you didn't know that you hired an agency? Anyway, no, our sweet spot is really companies that are doing between 5 and 20 million a year online. With those types of companies, we have a ton of success with scaling up. It's much easier to have open communication with them because there's less chefs in the kitchen, and that's really where we start seeing the best results. Is physical product brands between 5 to 20 million a year online.
And not necessarily already on Amazon, like they could be doing like a D2C exclusively, or they may be on Amazon already, but they should engage with you in either case because you can help them scale up.
Exactly. I mean, we've had plenty of brands that have been D2C native, and they come working with us, and we scale them to $3-4 million run rate within 3-4 months. So if you have a DTC store, or you're Amazon native, or a combination of both, we can help with any of those situations. Okay, true.
And so how do people find you?
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch with me is my email is Mike at AMZ Advisors.com. You can reach me there directly. You can also reach me through the website, amzadvisors.com, or directly through my own personal website, mikebegg.me. All of those work. LinkedIn also works. I am Michael Begg on there, CEO of AMZ Advisors. So any of those channels you can reach out to me on.
And of course, we're gonna drop a lot of that in the show notes, so you can track Mike down. Make sure you reach out, talk with Mike, connect with him on LinkedIn, and also I want to mention, if you're looking for a way to forecast your cash flow, model scenarios, understand the direction of your business, and being able to explain it to other stakeholders, please come visit us at dryrun.com. We'd love to talk with you. Thanks, Mike, so much. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for having me here, Blaine. I really enjoyed it.